So have you heard the news? Have you heard the news? No? Have you? I mean, isn't it true that we're waking up every day wondering what is the latest news story? Or not just that, not just on the news. If we're truthful, we're waiting for the call from our friend to give us the latest updated information about the gossip tree that's going on. Nancy, you know a lot about that.
Yes, I do.
But no, it's we want to know. You know, we want to be part of the inner circle, of the secrets. I mean, that if we have somebody coming up to us and say, "Have you heard?" and then they tell you, part of you feels like, look at me, I have some information that somebody else might not have. And who knows what you might use that information for. But of course we all know the problem with have you heard? I mean, imagine for a second that Peter, I go up to Peter and say to him, "Peter, have you heard?" And I tell him something. And then Peter goes to his mom, who's right next to him, and says, "Mom, have you heard?" Well, by the time it gets all the way to the back, Phil back there, Phil's story about have you heard is going to be probably 100% different than the story that I told Pete. Completely, and that's normal. So remember in school the old telephone thing, you know, it just, you pass it on to one person to the next, and by the time it gets all around to the end, it's bound to have been a completely different story. It would be, may I please, it ends up being fake news by the time it gets to the end, so. And the same is true in Jesus' time. People haven't changed. They want to know. People wanted to know. You know, and so people studied the Hebrew scripture. They want to know firsthand about what the laws of Moses were saying to them about how they were to live. The past few weeks we've been looking at the Sermon on the Mount in Matthew's Gospel. And just last week, Mother Maxine was preached on a text that was, first off, ridiculously long, and then secondly, you know, you would have to spend hours upon hours studying it, and people would go and look at what was said and try to figure out what Jesus meant. And they did that from everything from the 10 Commandments, which evolved into the 600 and plus laws. And they were all meant to keep God's chosen people holy because God was holy. But when you leave it to just a bunch of men, and it was a bunch of men, to come up with all of these rules and regulations, that they are bound to overstep the boundaries, to interpret what was written a bit too far, and to come up with all of these extra steps that we have to go through in order to be close to God. And thus, if you have all of these steps, I don't know about you, but I sin every day. And I could never follow all of those 600 and some laws. Nobody could. It was impossible. So the harder you tried to get closer to God, the more frustrated people came because they could not get there. Then this man comes along the scene. People have heard about him. People are admiring him. He's a great teacher, lots of wisdom. This man called Jesus, who, after calling to his disciples, would teach them and would teach all the followers about what it means to live your life the way that God would have you live. And what Jesus did was often to point out, time in and time out, over and over, how followers of God had taken the scripture, the Hebrew scripture, and bastardized it in order to actually not even be close to what was originally meant by the text. So Jesus would say, "You have heard it was said that an eye for an eye and a tooth for a tooth." Well, that's not even part of God's plan. And instead, Jesus would say, "Love your enemy." He would say, if somebody strikes you on the one cheek, turn your other cheek. Jesus took all of these things that are so often instinctive in our nature and says to us, no. If you really want to follow me, you need to get back to the roots of Scripture, to the roots of what it means to be a God of love, a God of understanding, a God who reaches out, and a God who, even when it's difficult, calls us to love those that we find difficult to love, to forgive those who we think we could never, ever forgive. I'd like to leave you with a true story, actually. Well, many of my stories are true, but this is a true story that happened in this parish 3 years ago. In fact, all my stories about Nancy are true, so don't let her ever tell you that they're not. So, you know, if you're on Facebook, in the past year they developed this wonderful little side app, On This Day. And you can click on this day and it shows you everything that you posted on Facebook on that same day. And what I love about it, it's like almost a journal, and it also just reminds you of stuff you forgot about. Good things or bad things. Well, 3 years ago, I had just come back from disability for my neck surgery. And I had found out that one of our parishioners, a gentleman in his 70s, very short man, not that strong, loving, most kind man you'll ever meet, that he was riding his bike in Massapequa, and a thug, and that's all I can say, a thug came up to him, stopped him, pushed him off his bike. He fell to the ground and said to the man, "Give me $5. Well, the man said, "I don't have any money on me." The thug just kept asking and started to beat him up and throw him around. He went in and looked at his wallet and his pockets, and there was no money, just like our friend said. The thug wanted the $5. Why? For a hit of heroin. And instead, what happened is our parishioner ended up in the hospital with various fractures and sprains and stitches and bruises for weeks, and then ended up in the rehabilitation center where I saw him when I came back. And as he was telling me the story, at the end I just asked him, I said, aren't you really angry? Forgive me, PO'd about what happened? And he said, you know, I feel bad for that person. Because they are so addicted to the drug that they were willing to hurt somebody else. But I can't be mad. I just need to forgive. That's what living the life that Jesus calls us to be is all about. Even if we think it's impossible, with God, all things are possible. Amen.
Amen.